Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brummett and Professor Chris Bean as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts, on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit, right here on the TriStar Podcast. Hello, welcome back to the TriStar Podcast. Of course, I'm Mr. Brummett. I'm here with our co-host and obviously the head instructor of our Bradley location, Professor Bean. Nice to see you again, sir.
Yes, sir. Welcome back.
Yeah. Well, today we've got an excellent topic where we're going to talk about obviously discipline, but maybe in a different fashion than what people might be thinking. Because I know a lot, especially kids think, and adults too, they think that discipline is a bad word.
Yes, especially in our society as it is now, discipline gets a negative connotation thrown onto it. You know, you get in trouble, you get disciplined. But if you can kind of flip the script on that, then perhaps you can avoid getting in trouble in the first place.
Exactly. So discipline over motivation today. You know, how to build unstoppable kids, and really and parents, because we all need good, solid discipline.
That's right. Yes. You know, we live in a world that rewards comfort, but greatness only grows through discipline. And if we can discipline ourselves, the world, like life gets so much easier from then on.
Yeah, and it's the phrase you've heard me say over and over again is, you know, discipline yourself to do what you ought to do when you ought to do it. A time will come you'll get to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, and that really is the essence of, you know, what I've talked about for years is, you know, self-discipline equals self-government. And in order to govern yourself, you have to have strong self-discipline, because someone is always going to govern over you. You know, when your child is a child, and when we are children, our parents are the ones that are governing over us. Obviously, you parents that are listening, you're governing over your child. But at some point, you want them to learn how to govern themselves. And the only way they can do that is through self-discipline. And we'll kind of get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, you know, and you talked about discipline it gets a negative kind of spin in today's society. But if with this type of mindset shift, if we can discipline ourselves to do the things that we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do it, then a time will come, like you said, that we can do the thing that we want to do when we want to do it. But what that means is we have to be able to understand where the line is for ourselves, and then hold ourselves accountable. Right, because really accountability and discipline, I think, are almost interchangeable in the sense that we're going to talk about it today. Because if we can be accountable to ourselves and do the things that we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do them, then, like you said, we can do the things that we want to do. But we have to be accountable and hold ourselves accountable and hold ourselves to that standard, so that we can do those things that we want to do when that time comes.
Yeah, and that's really the key. I think the other thing alongside that is, how as parents, right? How do parents help formulate that? I mean, we do, and we'll talk about this, but we do some of that out on the floor. But, you know, what are some key aspects for parents to be able to, you know, not only watch it happening out on the floor, but have some practical opportunities to be able to help their child, you know, gain that self-discipline that they need. And I think from the onset that we talked about, I think the biggest thing is, like you had mentioned, flipping the script, allowing us to have a different definition, if you will, on self-discipline, so that it doesn't come from a negative standpoint all the time, because true self-discipline is freedom.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's all about holding ourselves to that standard. And you know, you touched on this, but that, you know, the parents are kind of setting the standard for what the kids are supposed to do. And we did that for our parents. Our parents had set the standard for us on the things that we were allowed to do and we're not allowed to do. And as boys, we know we try to bump up against that line as close as we possibly can to see and test, well, where's the point at where we're going to get in trouble at? And then that's where the parents come in, and we have to be disciplined because we didn't discipline ourselves in order to hold that line. And I think that if we can allow the structure in class to happen, so that the students can understand that they can kind of almost govern themselves to a certain extent, with as far as, okay, this is where the moves are, this is how I'm supposed to do this. And then us as the instructors in the class get to say, okay, you stepped out of line here. This one wasn't quite correct. And then and what that means is, okay, so as we're teaching class, we're not giving them the standard every single time. We're not giving them the answer every single time. We're not holding their hand through all of the information. What we're doing is we're giving them an opportunity to do the information. And if or when they make that mistake, then we step in and correct that mistake, and then we step right back out. And I think that what that does is that builds the student's ability to see where that line is and then consistently hit that line as they move forward. Does that make sense?
It does. And we're not hand holding, but we're coming alongside.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the important piece with that is, yes, we might be leading in the front for a period of time, but once we've introduced the information, we step back and now we stand side by side with them and allow them to walk through that information, and make the mistakes, because it's really important for them to make the mistakes, but then also help them to identify what those mistakes are, and then let them critically think on how they can correct it. Because if we have to continually correct them without them critically thinking on what the best outcome and answer should be, and I've said this to parents, I don't know how many times, look, we want our kids to be self-disciplined. We want them to, and really what they want their kids to be disciplined. They want their kids to listen to them and follow what they do. I go, but there's a problem with that. They may be good, really good listeners and follow you really, really well. In fact, you might even have one child out of three, and I'm just using that as an example, one child out of three that follows almost every single, they become your quote unquote easy child. But the problem with that is, in some cases, is that they're so disciplined and so respectful that once they leave you and they're put into different situations, they're looking for someone else to plug their umbilical cord into. And the problem with that is, if they find the wrong source because they didn't learn how to critically think and make corrections on their own with your guidance, not your dominance, you've now created something even worse, unfortunately.
Right, because they're gonna seek that input from somebody, because they don't necessarily have the skill built up to be able to do it themselves. So they're going to be seeking somebody to be able to tell them, do this or do that, or think this way or think that way. And obviously, as parents, that's not at all what we're looking for. We want our kids, we want the students to grow up to be people in their own right, that stand on their own 2 feet without somebody else telling them or shaping them or molding them to where they need to be going. They need to be able to do that on their own. That's kind of the hope, wish, and dream as the parent. And if we are continually doing that hand-holding process, then they don't build up that skill to be able to do it on their own.
Yeah, they got to be able to critically think, because, again, you don't want them plugging their umbilical cord into somebody else, whether it's obviously you don't want it if somebody that's a negative influence, but even the fact that they plug it into somebody that's a positive influence and they can't think on their own, you still don't want that for your kid. And when your child, and like you had brought up, kind of butts up, and pushes the envelope a little bit, those pushbacks are important, and they need to happen, because what's happening, I believe, is they're not only trying to test the boundaries, but what they're also doing is trying to test their own beliefs. And when you can guide them through that rather than, hardcore disciplining them. And I'll give you for instance, our youngest one was pretty easy. We didn't have, Keegan was pretty easy, didn't have a lot of headbutting with him. But there was a time when, and this is funny because he came home from college. I don't remember if it was freshman year or sophomore year, but let's just say it was freshman year. Comes home during the break, Christmas break. He's home for a month. And my wife had said something to him about, hey, you didn't do whatever it was. I don't know if it was picking up his room or whatever. I have no idea. Whatever task she had given him, I don't recall. And he didn't respond. I'm in our bedroom. She says something to him. He doesn't respond. So I leave our bedroom, walk into his bedroom. I said, did you hear your mom? And he looks at me and he says, "This has nothing to do with you." And now, don't get me wrong. Did I want to rip him up out of that bed? Yeah, I did, because he was laying in his bed. I did. But all I simply said to him was, I want you to know how proud of you I am, because this conversation could have happened back when you were 12 or 13 years of age. But now it's happening now. And all I said was, you know what is right to do and how you're supposed to respond, but you have to make the decision on how you're going to do it. And then I just turned around and I walked out. And then shortly after that, he got up, did what she told him to do. And all was good. But don't get me wrong, I was frustrated. I wanted to rip him up out of that bed. But especially at that point, being that old, that would not have been a good thing to do, in my opinion. But all I did was I complimented him. I came alongside him, and I just said, "Hey, look at the landscape that's happening right now. Is this really the landscape that you want? Where do you want to water? What kind of garden do you want?" I mean, I didn't say those words, but basically that's kind of what I'm saying.
Well, and you corrected him, but you didn't do it in an overbearing type of way. You allowed him to come to that conclusion on his own by asking those questions. And of course, you knew what you were doing. You were leading him down the path that you wanted him to, inevitably get to. But he needed to get there on his own. You just allowed him to see the end.
Yeah, and I think that's what we do when we're out on the floor, when we're teaching the students, is we're creating situations that are allowing them to critically think. And we as instructors ask good questions to get them, or to guide them into what inevitably we believe should be the right answers. Now, for us, it's pretty cut and dry. A low block looks like this. A high block looks like this. A front kick looks like this. So there's not a lot of ifs, ands, or buts with that. So in that aspect, when we're talking just, the techniques, it's pretty clear. It's pretty simple to allow them to critically think and come up with those answers, because it's really difficult to say, yeah, no, you don't bend your knee with a front kick. Like, who's going to say that? So in that aspect, it's easy. But the concept is what I hope parents get from this conversation that we're having. The concept of asking those powerful questions and getting that shift to happen for their child. But here's the other thing, though. From the parent standpoint, we have to come in knowing, and I didn't know this in the beginning when I had kids, but when I got married, my wife already had 2 kids. So now automatically I had 2 step kids right away. I always said that I came in act 2, scene 3. And what I mean by that is, probably nobody's ever done this. They've never showed up to a play and now it's act 2, scene 3, meaning they missed all of act 1, they missed the intermission, and they've already missed the other 2 scenes, and now they're into the 3rd scene. And what do I mean by that? They had their own language, they had their own inside jokes, they had their own, like, everything. And now I'm the outsider coming in to this. And the reason I bring that up is because, man, I couldn't go in and go, yeah, no, this is the way we're going to do it, and this is how, I had to ask good questions in order to help guide to the best of my ability in that. And that's what we want to do. And I think we do a pretty good job out on the floor, is we ask the students the right questions to help them get the correct answers on their own. And the reason that's so important is because not only is that self-discipline, but that's where self-confidence comes from. Is they're like, wow, yeah, I can find the answers on my own, even though, we're kind of helping them.
Well, and self-empowerment goes right along with that too, because they become sort of quote unquote in charge of finding that answer. And then what they do as well there is they are using their brain to find the answer. They're thinking about it. They have to actually do some mental, acrobats in order to figure out what to do or what the right thing is there. And what that means is they are getting practice on using their brain to think through, okay, what's the best way I should do this? I think my teacher, or my mom or dad, whoever wants me to do this, But is that right? But if we do it in such a way that we kind of show them a path to take, but they have to walk down that path, then they get to do the effort. They get to have the reps of walking down that path and ending up at that desired outcome, which hopefully, if we do our job correctly, is the correct desired outcome.
And listen, the earlier you can start asking those questions, the better off you're going to be. Meaning your kid is 5 years old and they have a tantrum. And, yes, now the tantrum's over. And now you can ask the question, why did this happen? What do you want to do next time? How do we want to handle this situation? Like you can't do some of those things when that's happening, but you can also step out of that and do it later. Or you're out shopping and you see some other kid throwing a tantrum and you see your child has those tendencies and they do that. And you just say, hey, Jack, do you see that kid over there? And, Jack's like, yeah, I see it. Right. What do you think about that? What do you think's wrong? How do you think we could correct that? Like if that was you, so you could use other people as an example as well. But that's where we as parents, and this is kind of where I was going, I got off track. We as parents have to understand, and I didn't know this in the beginning, is we have to be comfortable understanding that we have to ask 1,000 questions. And our name is not going to be mom and dad sometimes. It's going to be Pete and repeat. It might be, and it could be the same topic, but then you have to ask it in a different way. Because you can't ask the same question over and over again all the time, because then it becomes white noise, right? You become I don't know if some of the parents would understand this reference, but the Charlie Brown, the Peanuts teacher, where all you hear is a wah, 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 wah. And that's where we come in too, because we always tell parents, look, we're a village. The nice thing is that when we speak and when we say something, the kids often listen to us because we're not the parents. We don't have what I call, for parents, it's slipping my mind now. What is it that I always say? They're familiar. The law of familiarity. They're dealing with the law of familiarity. Their kid is so familiar with them, their voice, their cadence, their speech, them repeating this. I told you, like. And so that's why it's number one, it's good to ask questions in different ways, not just ask the same question over and over again, because you got to break that white noise. But when we ask those questions and we say things, and we said this on different podcasts too, is utilize the same phrases that we say, because then that helps to break the white noise.
Well, and okay, so going back a little bit to about when either your kid or another kid is having that temper tantrum in the store and asking those questions. So when I hear that, I think it's like you are treating. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit weird to think about, I think, but this is how it makes sense to me. You want to dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have. And so you are talking to your kid like the person they're going to be, not like the kid who they are right now. And what that means is, okay, so we're not reprimanding them necessarily for doing this thing, but we're asking them a question and we're having a civil conversation about this, as opposed like two normal, understanding, respecting adults would, as opposed to a parent yelling at or disciplining the child, because then that changes that relationship. But if you can, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if you have those type of conversations and you talk to your kids like they are adults, I mean, not like adult language, that would not be helpful, and maybe adults shouldn't be using adult language anyways, but that's a whole different thing. But if you can talk to them like they're a normal human, like a normal adult human, like you would talk to at work or something, then they're going to start to act more mature because you're having more mature conversations with them, right?
Undoubtedly. And they, especially at younger ages, they mimic you. So your tone, your cadence, your ability to be able to control your anger, or your inability to be able to control your anger, they're going to mimic those things. And so, but I think I hate to say nowadays it's harder because, I'm sure our parents said the same thing and their grandparents said the same thing, but there is a cultural shift on why, and so discipline I do think is a little bit harder today because the instant gratification, the endless distractions that are happening, the lack, the participation awards,
Hmm.
like, oh, everybody gets a trophy. What do you call it? What did you say? It was, say, like the microwave culture, right?
Yeah, so
Versus the slow cooking culture.
we live in a microwave culture that is trying to master a slow cooked craft. Like you can't jump to the end of the process. We live in such a instant gratification type of society where delayed gratification really is going to build that discipline in ourselves. It's going to be able to hold ourselves accountable. We're be able to find a standard and stay on that standard and do something consistently and put the work in because we know what the delayed outcome is going to be, the delayed reward. And having that delayed reward is so rewarding when you actually work to achieve something. Just this week in class, we've had a student who has had a tough time getting. In fact, this is his third time through the same belt information, just because he's had tough time understanding and getting the information down. So he didn't make it the first time, didn't make it the second time. So really been trying to get him prepared for this one, because this is the third time. Really want him to be able to understand this information so that he can actually get to the next level. Just this past week, we've had stripe testing going on. He got the 2 stripes that was really holding him back the past couple times. And then not only did he get those 2 stripes, but he got in fact, at this point, he has all of his stripes that he needs to do his belt test. And I can see on his face, he is so happy, so relieved. He's that delayed reward. I mean, hopefully we don't always have to do this. And even for him, he learned this lesson so that he has to actually put the work in to get there on his own. But I think that because we live in such an instant gratification, he was thinking that, oh, I'll just be able to get it next time. I'll just get it. But that those things didn't happen. So he actually had to do the work. And I can see this quarter he's been doing the work. And now at this point, he's done all the work. He's got all of his stripes. All he has to do then is continue that so he can earn his belt when he does that belt test. And I think that having that happen for him, I think will be a change for him, because I think that this was a lesson that was due time for him to learn, and he had to learn it the tough way. Yes. But having learned that lesson, I think that'll be something that will stick with him, because like I said, not only did he get those 2 stripes that were really the ones that were holding him back, he's gotten all of his stripes and he's done really well on all of his information. And again, I can see the relief on him. I can see that he is happy when he comes into the class and he knows his stuff because he's been working on it. And so it obviously, we know that if practice happens, then you know your stuff. And sometimes we have to be the bad guy and hold people back when they don't do the work. But again, that instant gratification isn't something that it's not a participation. That belt is not a participation award. You don't just go up to belt testing. Okay, here's your belt. Thanks for showing up. No, you have to do your information. You have to earn that next belt. And especially the way that we have all of our classes where it's stacked on top of each other. It's not like you learn this quarter information here and you never do it again. You do the next quarter, you do that same information and then some, and then some, and some, all the way through up to black belt. So if you just give them their belt, it seems like you're doing the nice thing, but really what you're doing is you're really hurting them for the next quarter, and so on and so on. So that discipline. Okay, so I had a guy that I was talking to who's a Navy SEAL, talked about this, and I thought this was really interesting. Our kids like sweets, they like cake, and he used cake as the example. Kids have birthday cake, and they like birthday cake. Can I have another piece? Okay, you can have a little bit. You maybe have a little bit of ice cream or something. No, it's not. Let's be done with the cake. No, I want another piece of cake. I want another piece of cake. No, you can't have another piece of cake. We have to do the right thing and tell them no. Right? That is the right thing. We can't just give them cake and keep giving them cake and keep like you can't do that. We as a parent, that's not the right thing to do. That would be the instant gratification side of things. But we have to live as parents oftentimes in the delayed reward side of things to delay that. Okay, listen, we can have cake and ice cream, that's fine, but we can't do it all the time. You can't do it every day. You can't have that for all the meals, right? So we have to delay that gratification. And I think that sometimes as parents, we feel like we're being the bad guy. But really, we're doing the right thing, the just thing, and the correct thing, not only for the kid right now, but for their future. Because if we just give them cake all the time, I mean, that would be terrible. Nobody, that would be, their teeth would be bad. They would be, their health would be not great. All kinds of negative things would happen if we just gave into every want that the kid has. So we have to hold the line a little bit. We have to allow them to be accountable to a certain extent. But we also have to kind of guide them, like you said, and ask them those questions. Like, it really is another piece of cake the right thing for you right now? Is that the healthy thing that you want to do? And then get them to think, oh no, you know what? Maybe no, that's not the right thing. And by doing that, then they get to flex their brain muscle a little bit and learn that and that skill, that ability to hold themselves accountable.
I heard a gentleman say this, and I don't want to say the name, and I really loved what he said. It fits, but he's one of our former third degree black belts. But he said, the kids' brains aren't fully formed until age 25. So he would say to his kids, "Look, you're going to use my brain until yours is fully functional," and that's true. But we want them to become fully functional. So our efforts are to teach them how to ask critical questions and come up with the correct answers for themselves in order to be able to critically think and then move forward. And kudos to the parents that you talked about with that kid, because they could have let him quit.
Yes.
Or they themselves could have been angry that you didn't give their kid the stripe and you didn't let him test, and now he's got to do this 3 months over again. And truth be told, we've gone through that. We've had people that didn't earn all their stripes, be it whether it was their leadership stripe, and that was the only one they didn't get, and or any skill stripes. And then what do? They get angry at us, you specifically, because you're the one that's there talking to them, and then they quit. And what does that teach their child? You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate to call the parents out that do that. And look, none of them are listening to this anyways, probably. but if you think about it, quitting, I'm sorry for bringing this up, but that's one of the chapters in my book where it talks about quitting hurts more than you think. Because there's just so much more than just that initial feeling or feelings that are happening.
Well, it's interesting to me because oftentimes, we meet with the parents, but when they start onto the program, and they say things like, "We want discipline and focus and respect and coordination, all of these things," and then it's almost like that very first chance that we have to step in to discipline or reprimand their kid, they step in. You know what? It's my fault. They didn't have their belt. It's totally not. No, it's not. It's not your fault as the parent. It's the kid's fault that they didn't have their belt. It's their responsibility. It's their belt, not your belt, right?
I would interject. It can be the parent's fault, but it's still the child's responsibility. Those two can be separated. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the only reason I say that is because West Point Way of Leadership, I forget who wrote it, but after reading that book, the guy who wrote it, they were talking about they had a parade rest or whatever they call it. They had to line up. And I wasn't in the military, so I'm not going to do the terms correct. But anyways, they had to run and line up, and they're standing. And the dude that was standing next to, that had to stand on one side of him, actually walked over and scuffed his boot on top, his heel on top of his boot. And then they're standing in line. So he's not perfectly like he's not perfect like he's supposed to be. And then he gets reamed out because his boot has a scuff mark on it. That was not his fault, but it was still his responsibility. And the problem with, which I'm sure you're going to this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, the problem is that when you don't, even if it isn't your fault, but yet you don't take responsibility, the moment you don't take responsibility, then you lose the power to be able to make any type of change.
Right. They give us the opportunity. They tell us they want us to have the opportunity to discipline and reprimand and teach their kids respect and discipline, all of these things. But then the first step that we have to do that, we get that taken away. And that's a tough thing for me. I think it's because parents, they want focus, they want respect in their kids, but because society rewards shortcuts, hacks, everybody gets a reward, that everybody is so preset in that way of thinking that they just assume that, oh, this is what it's going to be. Well, we do not operate necessarily under those standards. And I think that is a learning curve that sometimes parents have to get as they are going through the program. And I don't mean to harp bad on the parents, but I think that if that's what they truly want for their kids, then we have to have the ability to do that. And it's not like we're doing it because we want to hurt the kid or to demean them. We want to have we want to allow the student themselves to come to the conclusion that they need to hold themselves to a higher standard. Because if they can hold themselves to a higher standard, whatever society is going to be doing, they're going to be far and away better than everybody that is their age, at least, because they are able to do that. And if we live now, like you said, we live in a society where everybody gets reward, everybody gets a trophy, everybody was a winner. But factually, that's not at all how things work. Not at all. And so by not allowing that discipline to happen in the moment, by the parent taking that on themselves, then that actually hurts and demeans all the other things that we do out on the floor, because then it's almost like it's meaningless, because it doesn't carry the weight that it should, because the parent's just going to step in. Oh, we're going to get you. I'm going to buy your belt from wherever the karate people buy the belt from, and you can have that belt, no problem. But that doesn't mean anything. Anybody can go buy a black belt, but if you don't have the mentality, not even the moves. The moves are one whole thing separate from the type of person who earns that black belt. That is something different entirely. And once you are that type of person who earns a black belt, moves will fade. Especially if black belt was your goal and you stop after black belt. If that's your goal, you made it to that goal, you became the type of person who you needed to be that black belt, the moves will fade. The moves will not be there. And that type of person who became that black belt, you will be moving forward. That is something that you will wear as a badge of honor, as part of your persona moving forward. Now, if you can continue after that, leaps and bounds, you will be better for it, because there's so much more. Again, not even talking about the moves, but there's so much more that you learn after black belt. That's black belt is like getting your white belt all over again.
Oh, yes.
In so many aspects. Yes, moves. Yes, the moves change a whole bunch, but not even talking about the moves. There's so much more that happens from first degree to second degree. And then again from second degree to third degree, and so on after that. It is the type of person who you are to become those higher ranking black belts. It I think fundamentally changes you as a person, and then you become that type of mentality. And being a black belt first degree is one thing, but getting to second, third, and fourth, and so on, that is something different entirely. Yeah, absolutely entirely. And again, the moment you stop training is the moment the moves start to fade away. But that mentality that you have, that you earned making that black belt, or second degree, or third degree, or fourth degree, those things stay with you forever, because that is who you are from then on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I don't even have anything to say on that, because I totally agree with you with that. And I will say, and I don't know if we want to talk about this, but martial arts really builds that mental discipline with the the physical repetition that leads to that mental strength, and that's the thing that carry, like, one of the things that you talked about, carries on with them. The forms, they help you to focus, memorize, and sometimes even focus under pressure, depending, getting up and showing up and coming to class even when you don't feel like it. What does that say about the person that you are? And then again, to your point, the person that you become because of those things.
Well, and it also gives you an opportunity to step outside your comfort zone. We've had many people who are athletes, kid athletes into teenager athletes into adult athletes, come into the program, and almost every single time they get done with class, they're like, wow, that was much different than any activity or any sport that I've ever done before, because it is so much different than basketball or football or baseball. In any other ball sport, it is so much different than those. So much different. The mentality is different. The skill, the muscle that's involved and required to do martial art is so different than the other things. Now, the benefit is all of those muscles that you incorporate doing martial arts is leaps and bounds set you, above the pack doing running or basketball or football, whatever the other sport is, because of the way that you get to know where your body is in space and time. Right. And I think the right term for that is proprioception. Proprioception is knowing where your body is. Like I know my arm is here. We do this in class all the time where you have opportunities to throw a punch at somebody, but you have to come close to them, but not actually whack them. Right. And that happens all the time, whether you're in the 3 and 4 year old class, all the way through. We have to do our moves. We have to be controlled and not hit something. Like as I'm recording today, I know that I have to not hit this owl and knock it over. So I'm moving my arm around, but I know that owl is there. I know where my arm is. That's proprioception. So that skill in itself is okay. When I do a punch, I have to know that it is at my nose height here. It's not here. It's not over here. It's not up this way. It's here, right where my nose is. And being able to do that means that I know how to move my body. And being able to move your body and knowing where your body is and how to move your body, it helps in all of the other activities that you do, including life. And the other thing that I think martial arts does that is really beneficial is it gives you an opportunity to challenge yourself in such a way that is a solo practice, but also is a group practice. And I think that's another very unique thing about martial arts. Martial arts is an individual sport, but is also a group sport, meaning I can show up to class and basically put blinders on and be there by myself and not worry about anybody that's there around unless I need to do a partner drill. I can not worry about any of those people, or I can be there and fully worry about all of those people. And it's a little bit of yes and. I have to do both. I have to be aware of who and where I am, but I also need to be aware of where everybody else is. But the better I do my job as an individual, the better every individual does their job, the better the class is, the better everybody's going to be for that. And I think that's something else that's different. And so discipline is a topic for today. Everybody is chasing motivation. And I think motivation and discipline kind of go hand in hand with this, because if you are not motivated, then it's hard to be disciplined. If you're not disciplined, then it's hard to be motivated. So everybody is chasing motivation. Discipline does not need motivation. What it needs is commitment. Motivation is a spark. Discipline is the fire that you feed every single day. And I think that with that kind of concept, that if I can be disciplined, motivation is not something I need, right? I just disciplined myself to be accountable to myself, to hold the line, to do the things that I want to do. Even when I don't want to do them, I do them anyways because I'm disciplined. I am a disciplined person. And I think that with, again, discipline being the topic, if we can allow our students to incorporate that to themselves, if they can learn that discipline, learn where that line is, learn where that standard is, and we help to set the standards for them, but everybody has their own standards they have to build and kind of grow into themselves. And I think that's the right way of thinking about it. They have to grow into what their standard is. We set the standard and we allow them to grow to reach that standard. And each time they get a new rank, each time they get a new belt, we grow that standard, and they have to grow back into that position again. And I think that, discipline is training. It's not punishment, right? That was kind of the dichotomy that we talked about earlier. Discipline is training, not punishment. Consistent action towards whatever the goal is, even when the emotion fades. That is discipline, right? Showing up to class when you're tired. You said that already. Showing up to class when you're tired. That is one of those things that is a skill that you have when you earn that black belt. That is that person that you become. Those are the things that you take away. Bowing with respect after losing. You lose that sparring match, you know that you lost. But you have to bow, you shake their hand, you congratulate them, having that camaraderie between them. Again, all of those things are so helpful outside of the martial arts school. But that's all included with what discipline really is.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's funny because as soon as you brought up sparring, I remember Mrs. Chandler. I'm just going to call her out, but because she wouldn't mind. But she had a big fear is the right word, but with her kids sparring for the first time, and I remember this conversation with her. One of her kids got hit during sparring, and of course she's on the sideline. She was like, "Oh, that type of thing." And she heard me say this, which she was not happy when I said this. And the kid said, something about getting hit. And I said, well, you know how to handle that next time, right? And they're like, no. And I go, block. And she was not happy. Or I said duck or block, whichever it was, but she could probably tell you, she'll tell you verbatim, but she was not happy with that response. Now, she didn't tell me that probably for another year, but what she had seen over that time frame is she saw her kids shift, not just the one that got hit, but just, did they still get hit? Sure. You know what I mean? But what she saw was a deeper meaning behind what was happening out on the floor. Was she looking for me to coddle? No, she wanted me to be a little bit more, probably a lot more sympathetic, empathetic, whatever. I was just direct. But see, I can do that. You can do that. That's our role because of the martial arts. Yes, do we, have we put our arms around a student before because they needed it? Yes. I mean, proverbially, or maybe physically, but, proverbially, we have. But there's times that that's not what they need. And so, we give them that tough love in order to, and now notice though, what did I say? I didn't say, here's what you do to fix that. I started out with a question. Well, would you like to know how to change that or handle that or make that different? Whatever I specifically said, but I always ask a question first so that I get the permission. And then once I have the permission, then I can give the answer. And he gave me the permission. I said, okay, then block it next time or duck, whichever one I said, I forget. But the point is there, he gave me the permission and he learned from that. But what also happened is his mom learned from that in a way that she was then now able to appreciate some of that directness that we are able to do in those type of positions. And I don't know how this directly ties into self-discipline, but when you said sparring, that's the thing that came up in my head. But that's growth, right?
Well, I think that, okay, so how do we tie that back to discipline? That was our opportunity to help to, maybe discipline wasn't maybe the right word there, but to help them to achieve or be more. And it was not about giving them a trophy. Not everybody got a trophy there. He didn't win. He got whacked. Okay, so this is what we need to do to help that moving forward. And it wasn't the answer that they wanted to hear, but it was the answer that was important for them to hear, to grow as a person, to be able to grow into where that standard was for himself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've done daycare programs before where I've had kids, not win, like even just stand up, like, all right, who can stand up the quickest? And I remember this one girl this past summer, in the summer of 2025, she cried because she didn't win. And she kept crying. And I said, hey, are you hurt? No. I said, okay, so you're not physically hurt. No. I said, are you emotionally hurt? Do you feel bad? Yeah. I said, okay. I said, let me just ask you this. I go, is crying going to make you win next time? No. I said, what's going to make you win next time? And the crying is starting to subside a little bit. Stand up faster. And I said, yeah. I said, we'll get another chance. And even if you don't win at that time, at least you know now what you can do to win, that crying isn't going to help you win that. Now, it's okay to cry when we're hurt. I get that. And then, next time she still didn't win, and you could see her kinda, and then she was like, okay, what decision do I want to make? Type thing. She kind of looked at me and I just kind of looked at her and she didn't cry. Now, does that happen every time? No, but what we're doing is we're getting them to critically think and then grow, and then critically think and then grow. And I wanted to bring this up real quick. You had brought about things that last, forever, even if you stop at black belt. Do you remember Jay Sloan? Do you remember him?
I don't think so.
Okay. If I showed you a picture, I'm sure you would be like, oh yeah, I think, yeah. So, Jay Jordan.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Jay Jordan.
Okay.
Yeah. So His mom's last name is Sloan.
Oh,
Anyways, so okay. Anyhow, he went off to college. He got her first degree black belt with us. Went off to college. Went and played football. And then later on, now, well, he got into teaching, and then now he is a football coach at oh gosh, I can't remember now. I'm trying to look it up real quick here. Let's see. Streeter.
oh,
Streeter. So I pulled it up just because I knew that I wanted to bring it up. Anyways, all that to being said, I saw him when I was out at SALT, teaching one of my programs out there, and he was filling in out there as one of the teachers, and we were talking about his football career, and he's like, I just want you to know, you have no idea how much the hand techniques, the wrist manipulations, the movements made me a better football player, because at that line of scrimmage, when you're hitting that person and you're moving, you've got to be able to maneuver them and push them around and use their weight against them and all this other stuff, and which is so true, because one of my good friends, Mike Storms, he actually is the defensive, right now it's for Tulane College, what defensive defense, what is it, tactical, what is it, I can't think of what it's called. Anyways, it's basically martial arts and football. He's teaching them how to hit and move and turn and use, because he's been in martial arts forever. I can't think of the name. It'll hit me later. But anyways, he specifically, that's one of his jobs that he does, and he's done it for NFL teams before too. And so, but it was just funny that okay, so Jay, he goes off to college, uses his physical martial arts abilities, gets a degree. Now he's using this is really neat. He's using his leadership abilities from our leadership program, because it was still called leadership at the time. It wasn't Black Belt Club when he had joined. But anyways, his leadership abilities, and we had this conversation, in order to help lead the football team. Ben, remember Ben Toberman?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's now the coach for McNamara's
I did
team.
know that. Yep.
Yeah, and he's using his leadership abilities.
Him and his brother, I think, are both coaches there.
Oh, his brother doing it too?
Yeah.
Okay, great, because they're all black belts with us. But it's really neat to see that those things flourish. And the reason I bring that up, all to your point, that it's not just the physical skills. Mm-hmm. It is these mental disciplines, these leadership qualities, right? That mental discipline, that self-discipline that carries over into every single thing that you do.
Right. And though it's hard to define when or where those happen in the program. It's just an intrinsic part of the program, and maybe an intrinsic part of martial arts in general. But I think that the way that we have structured our program, I'm biased to say this, but I think that ours is a little bit is designed in such a way that those things are happening on purpose and not by accident, like they likely are on other schools.
Well, look, when we first started, they were happening by accident, just like everybody else. They were. I mean, I have no bones about it. But as time went on, we started asking ourselves the question, how can we do these things on purpose rather than just happening by happenstance? And so you're not wrong, because we've done the work looking at what we can do, how we can do it, so that we can build these skills, this one being self-discipline, into the people that interact with us. And we've talked about this before. The longer they're with us, the bigger influence that we get to have on them.
Right, which is why when they get to black belt, they've already had all this. But again, when they go to black belt, that's just a minor stepping stone in the grand scheme of what the martial arts is, even what our program is. And that jump from first degree to second degree, it's 2 years. For those people that don't know, it's 2 years to get from first degree black belt to second degree black belt. That jump is almost double the jump that it was from white belt to black belt, I think, most of the time. And I think that there's a couple factors that are in play. I think it's because of the way that the black belt class is. It's like would be like a college course as compared to like a grade school course or even a high school course, the below black belt is, just because of the way the classes, it's so much different. But the other thing that happens in there is by the time they get to black belt, they are of a certain age. And that 2 year time span from first degree to second degree, they're maturing into more of an adult, if not into an adult. And I think that
That combination.
yeah, that combination, they couple well to really have that byproduct be really something special by the time they get to second degree, and then again by the time they get to third degree, and so on for fourth degree.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And if a child starts with us when they're 5, they go through the 5 and 6-year-old program. I've said this for years. They go through the 5 and 6-year-old program. They've been with us for 2 years. Then they get into the 7 and up program. They've got another 4 years to black belt. So what is that? 11.
Mm-hmm.
So by 11, they're a first degree black belt, and then by 13, they're a second degree black belt, and then by 16, they got their driver's license and they're a a third degree black belt. And you play with those numbers, but that's pretty darn close. I mean, the times are close. Depending on when their age switches, that's the only variable. But the earlier you can get them in, the better, and the more impact that they have. But every single time, those 5 and 6-year-olds, when they test for first degree, man, they look really good. More often times better than the individuals that started at that are 8 or 7 even sometimes. And no offense to anybody with that. That's just that. They've just been with us longer. So that sounds, now that being said, obviously if somebody starts at age 11 and now they're 15 when they test for their first degree black belt, physically they look a lot better just because of their physical abilities and their mental capability to understand things at a deeper level. But other than that, man, the earlier you can get them started, the more opportunities to teach your child self-discipline we have, and to come alongside you to help you. Because how often do you have conversations where parents go, hey, can you talk to my kid because we're having this, and unfortunately, sometimes it's because they have threatened their child over and over and over again, and now they finally have to follow through. When the first time they threaten, they should follow through. But that's the only qualm that I have. But think about that. How many times have you had conversations with kids and help to adjust that self-discipline or point out something to them? Is there anyone that you can kind of, don't say names, but is there anyone that you can kind of, an example? I have one on the top of my head, but.
Well, I chuckle a little bit because so I started helping to teach classes when I was 14. And since then, almost, I was having these type of conversations to help to teach these kids discipline. Since I was, 14, 15, 16, I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, I'm having a conversation with this kid to help teach them discipline. I don't even have kids. I'm not even old enough to have kids at this point. Like, what am I supposed to do? But because of the mentality of a martial artist, that's where the kind of the direction that I took. Does anybody stand out? Maybe a couple of them. I don't know that anybody like there's any huge takeaways that I can tell about, but I can remember having these conversations. The weird part for me is it was a surreal experience having these conversations with the kids, not as a parent. That was the weirdest
I felt
part for me.
inadequate. I was right there with you. I was having conversations with parents and how they can solve the problem before I even had kids. So I get it. I totally get it. I had this is probably about a month and a half ago, kid in our 7 and up program. He's in the beginners class. Dad had said, hey, we've been talking to so-and-so, this is what's happening at home. And we told him, look, if this keeps going on, then we're going to have to talk to Professor Brummett. And I said, well, first thing, thank you for saying that. Second, thank you for letting me know. Third is, now that you have put your cards on the table, you're going to have to play that deck when you feel it's the right time to do it, because you can't keep saying, here's the deck, here's the deck, here's the deck. Like, you can't do that. So there was an opportune time, and everybody had left, and it was on a Friday night, and they were actually the last people that were there for open mat. And I said, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I go, I know that you've been debating on whether or not to have a discussion with your son about this. Nobody's here. What do you think? He's like, yeah. So I called the kid over and talked with him about what was happening. And first off, I go, how does it make you feel now knowing that I know, and I'm not giving you the whole context because I don't remember everything, but one of the things I asked him is, how does that make you feel? No, how does that make you feel now knowing that I know that this is how you acted at home? And he just was kind of like, well, not good. And probably the word embarrassed, if he was able to formulate that, would come out. And I don't think I'm putting words in his mouth, but and I said, okay. I said, let me just tell you how I see you, because this is the person I see out on the floor. You always say, yes, sir. You're the first to take action. If not one of the first to take actions, you're always following directions. I go, what's the difference for you doing that here than at home? Why are you not doing that at home? So he gave me some answers. He obviously can't see everything we as adults can see. So I brought out some things and I said, when this happens and your parents say this, what is your response? Well, he's like, I get angry and I fire, these are my terms. I fire back. And I said, okay, but by firing back, this is what's happening. Now your parents are going to have to come down on you a little bit more because now you're being disrespectful. He's like, yeah. I said, okay. I said, do you want to be disrespectful to them? No, I don't. I said, okay, good. I said, Dad, I said, do you want him to be disrespectful to you? No. I said, okay, so-and-so, the kid, I don't want to give his name out. What would be easier for you to take? Like, what would sound better for your parents to say to you to still get the point across, yet you don't get fired up and want to fire back at them? He's like, I don't know. I said, well, we need to think about that. And so then we came up with an idea, us collectively, but it was more his idea. I kind of guided it, and it had to do with, the timeout. Like, man, this is heated. I need to take a timeout. Okay, go ahead. So anytime you call a timeout, but look, we can only have a timeout. We can only call one timeout on that one issue. You can't have that same issue and have a timeout every single time. So meaning you can't use that as, I'm getting trouble again for the same thing. I can call a timeout again. No, you get one timeout per. He's like, okay, that makes sense. And so they've been using it now. I checked in, they've been using it. And the nice thing is they're at the point now where, he can, like, the parents can see him formulate, like, thinking, going, and then they'll say, do you need a timeout? Sometimes he says yes, and other times he says no. I think we can talk about it. And one of the stories that I used to him was this. I said, I remember my middle son one time coming up to me and saying, hey, can I have some ice cream? And I said, no, it's a half an hour to bedtime. You can't have any ice cream. So then he left and went up to his room. Comes down about maybe 10 minutes later, and he says, you know what? He says, Taylor, who's the oldest, she just had some ice cream. She didn't even ask, and she got ice cream. And I go, you know what? You're right. I go, you can have some ice cream. And here's the reason why. I go, because twofold. One, yeah, it was not fair, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is because I know it disappointed you that you didn't get ice cream, yet you didn't yell or scream at me about it. You went up to the room, you thought about what you were going to say, you came back down, you articulated what you had to say about it. And he was probably 11 or 12 at the time, and so I'm going to reward that, but you're not going to get the ice cream. I'm going to scoop it out for you. And I gave him a lot, and just rewarding that. And so I shared that story with this kid, and I said, here's the reason why. I go, you're not always going to get a reward, but the reason he got a reward and he got the ice cream was because he didn't throw a fit. He decided how he wanted to approach it and then went and approached it. Now, he didn't know I was going to do that. He just wanted to state what was happening. And I think that's what we do when we ask those right questions to our kids out on the floor, and then get them to help formulate the answers so that they can become self-sufficient, self-disciplined, not looking for others to plug their umbilical cord into.
Well, and I think that brings it full circle. Self-discipline equals self-government. If you can discipline yourself to do the things that you need to do, even though you don't necessarily want to do those things, later will come a time that you will get to do the things that you want to do when you want to do them.
Agreed. And I know we need to wrap up, but in speeches and stuff that I'll do at schools and what have you, and even some of the field trips, we talk about self-discipline, and I say to the kids, I say, hey, raise your hand if you'd like to shut your parents up. And every kid, they're looking around. Some of the they'll look at the teachers going, I can't believe that he just said that, shut your parents up. I say, here's how you shut your parents up. But before I tell you, let me ask you this question. Who knows that you should already be doing something before you should be doing it, and then you don't do it, and then your parents get angry at you about it? The same group, right? Raise their hand. I go, okay, so here's what you do. I go, you go and you just do what you're supposed to do before your parents tell you to do it. Now, let's just pretend that every Saturday morning, when you wake up, you're supposed to pick up your room. Maybe not clean it, but pick everything up, right? But every morning you don't do that. So what happens is your mom's walking down the hallway, because this is the thing that happens every morning, and she's already fired up. She's ready to open up that door and yell at you, because she knows last week and the 3 weeks before that and the 4 weeks before that, she had to yell at you to get the room picked up anyway. So she's already fired up. And so she goes to open up the door and walk in, and all of a sudden she sees everything picked up. And this is what I do. I fall out as if I'm the parent, fainting, and the kids are laughing. And I go, now, when your mom wakes up, she ain't dead. She just fainted. When she wakes up, she's going to be so happy. And guess what? You shut her up. She didn't have to tell you what to do, because you already did what you were supposed to do. I go, that's self-discipline.
Well, okay, so I think that's a great challenge, I think, to the listeners. What is one thing that you know that you should be doing that you don't necessarily feel like that you want to do, but you could do, right? What is one way that you could practice that discipline to show that off? And if you're the parent listening, how can you be the example doing that thing that you don't necessarily want to do, but you do it anyways because you know that you're setting the example to your kids? And for the kids listening, if you can do that one thing that, like Mr. Brown was just saying, do that one thing that you know that you're supposed to do even before you're told to do it, that's the way to get that discipline across. No problem.
Absolutely. So, hey, what do we, what you want to let the listeners know what we're chatting about next week?
Yeah, next week is an exciting one. I think next week we're going to talk about daily habits that help you to become unstoppable. And I think we're going to have a couple mindset shifts in there that'll be really beneficial for whether you're a kid or an adult that's going to listen to it.
Well, I can't wait. And subscribe to the podcast, share it with other parents. Even if they're not in the studio, please share it with other parents, because there's obviously what we believe is practical tips for them to be able to use in order to, I'm selfishly going to say it, raise their kid as a black belt, even if they're not in our program.
Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting TriStarKarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.